Morning, Teda Ard. No?
I don't know what's happening with this phone. There's too many classes here.
Teda Ard, Pasha Shmeith. Page Nun Dalid, top of the page. Okay, the last thing the Alter Rebbe is explaining is that Jews come down here to plant mitzvahs. Just like the seed doesn't taste like anything, it's not a food, so therefore only what's bittul can you plant, and yet nevertheless through the bittul of the seed, that it doesn't taste like anything, and now that it germinates in the ground, so then you have that the outcome of it is much greater, and tastes better than the seed, even if the seed does have a taste. The same thing, that only by coming down into Gashmias, and then Zereh Tzedakah, like it says through the mitzvah Tzedakah, that it says that everybody gives, it's only for our benefit, he says, because Hashem could himself support the poor man. But Hashem wants us to do it, so that's why the neshama comes into the world, and that's why it's a boim yashresh Yaakov. Yaakov is the level of the neshama in the body, therefore it's planted, and then it becomes the sprouting of Yisrael. So he said, there's a top of the page, mamish top of the page of Nun Dalet. And that's what David HaMelech says in Tillim, that mitzvahs are very broad, meaning through the mitzvahs, planting the seed, you create an infinite amount of kedusha, infinite amount of fruits, and so on. That's what the pasuk says. Fortunate is those that plant over water, meaning all the understandings of a godliness in the higher Gan Eden and in the lower Gan Eden are called mayim. Like we said, fire represents a longing to something. Water represents you're there already and you're being quenched. So it says all the revelations of Gan Eden are called mayim. Like it says, "V'nor yeitzeh me'eden, ma'she'en kein ma'isa hamitzvos." But ma'isa mitzvos, action of mitzvos down here, na'sezriya kol mayim l'mayla, becomes a level mayla mechinas mayim anal. The pasuk says, "Ashrechem, fortune is those that plant over the water." So he says, what does that mean? Doesn't make sense. It means that mayim represents the understanding of the neshamas in Gan Eden, higher Gan Eden, lower Gan Eden. People that plant seeds, meaning the action of a mitzvah down here, is much greater than the revelations of Gan Eden. Like it's a one tshuva ma'asim tov in this world is better than the whole Olam Haba. The same thing, not only mitzvahs, but also learning Torah. When Torah comes into physical objects, it also becomes a level of planting. In other words, until now, the Alter Rebbe spoke about mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are the level of planting. Here, the Alter Rebbe is saying that learning Torah is the same thing. Okay? It says, the Gemara says, in Bad Gan Eden, fortunate is the one that comes to Gan Eden with Torah in his hand. So the question, Lemaila in Gan Eden, you don't need all this gashmistic or Torah. He says, these things you could keep, these things you can't keep, all the things. So why is guy who comes to Gan Eden with Torah dealing with physical objects? Because in Gan Eden they also learn Torah. But in Gan Eden they don't learn it physically, they learn the same things that we're learning here, they learn spiritually. Like we said, the famous Mishnah, Shnai Meichsim B'Talis. These are the two examples Chassidus gives. Two people are holding a talis. They come to Besdin, this guy says, I found it, this guy says, I found it. You know, it's all mine, it's all mine. So how do they learn that in Gan Eden? There's no talis there. So Chassidus explains, the Shamas are covered to Gan Eden, they're fighting, mitzvah is called garments. So Shnai Meichsim B'Talis, two neshamas come up to Gan Eden, they're fighting over a mitzvah. This one says, I did the mitzvah. This guy said, no, I did the mitzvah. Or the another Mishnah, the Chassidus brings the analogy, a machlek part of a chamor, you exchange a cow for a donkey, and then the donkey gives, the cow gives birth, and you don't know, was it before the exchange or after the exchange? So then the question is, who does the calf belong to? So they learn it, there's a Yetzer Hara called cow, there's a Yetzer Hara called chamor, they learn it much different. So l'chayra, why are you saying that praise fortune is the one that comes here with learning in his hand? What is it? How does that come to the learning in Gan Eden? He says actually now, because this blossoming is dafke nishra v'niklet ba'aretz. Dafke when it's planted and taking root in the physical world. Then, in other words, from the learning Torah down here, you have flourish. It flourishes. Learning Torah in Gan Eden doesn't flourish. What?
How did the Avot end up in the Gan Eden if they didn't keep mitzvot seemingly the Yashku the way we do?
They kept mitzvahs on their level. Whatever way they kept it.
Is not the environment of Gan Eden.
Because before Matan Torah, the mitzvahs didn't need to be done physically.
So how did it end up in the Gan Eden?
I said because before Matan Torah, mitzvahs did not need to be done physically. They could be done spiritually. And when they did mitzvahs spiritually,
Not the same result.
same result.
Rabbi Shusana,
What?
we were told Torah is a blueprint of this world.
Correct.
What's got to do with Gan Eden? The Torah is not in Gan Eden. It's for here.
That's one aspect of Torah. One aspect of Torah. But if you remember, we learned Torah is called Chachmaseh Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the wisdom of Hashem. Torah is called God's toy that He plays with.
For this world.
1 second. So number one, there's a level of Torah which is Chachma, and there's a level of Torah which is the Hashem's toy, which is infinitely greater than the world. But not only that, if you say Torah is the blueprint of the world, all worlds, Torah is the blueprint not only of the physical world, Torah is the blueprint of all worlds. That means Torah is higher than Atzilus, higher than Ak, higher than all those levels. So there's an aspect of Torah when it comes into wisdom. There's an aspect of Torah which is the toy of Hashem, and there's different levels of Torah. So Torah is higher than Gan Eden also. There's different aspects of Torah.
You just mentioned before Matan Torah.
Yeah.
So therefore,
A little louder, please.
so there was no Torah before Matan Torah.
They had Torah.
So what is Matan?
They didn't have the ability to bring Torah into the physical world. What did Yaakov Avinu went to yeshiva 14 years?
Right.
What did he learn?
Yeah, no.
He learned Torah. Avram Zakir v'yeshiv yeshiva. The Gemara says Avram Avinu learned in yeshiva, Yitzchak learned in yeshiva, Yaakov in Mitzrayim they learned Torah.
But there was no Torah.
There was Torah.
If there was Torah, what? So why was it after Matan Torah?
Because after, you're not listening. After Matan Torah, by doing mitzvahs, you're able to make the physical world holy. Torah was able to make the physical world holy.
After
Before,
Matan Torah.
yes, before Matan Torah didn't. But Torah existed before.
So if it
Hashem created the world with Torah.
Well, it wasn't given to us yet. It was given to
It
us
wasn't
after-
given in the
Given
physical,
Pardon?
it wasn't given into the physical world to impact the physical
If
world.
it wasn't, so what were they studying if it wasn't there?
Torah, on a higher level.
Should have been the other way around. Before
Did
Matan
Yaakov
Torah,
Avinu-
should have been more tangible and physical so that they could
Did
study.
Yaakov Avinu learn Torah? He went to Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever.
There was no Torah for him to study.
What did he learn there? Comic books?
I don't know. Nowhere does it say that he was sitting and reading Torah.
Yes, it does. He was learning Torah in Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever for 14 years.
He implies so.
No, that's what it's-
That it was implied. It was never ever.
Okay.
Obviously, it says Matan Torah because before that there was no Torah.
That doesn't, no. I can have something and then give it to you, but before I give it to you, it still exists.
Right.
If I give you this,
How can I study something that you haven't even given it to me yet?
it was there yet. How? But I could study. I could study it. I could study
You
it.
can study, but
That- but
I don't know where we were.
If I give you this book,
Right, exactly.
why don't you listen?
Tangible.
His
I can hold
question
it.
is, if it wasn't a physical book, what were they studying? That's his question. That's what he's not getting.
It's obvious what I'm saying.
If I, no, it's not.
You're being evasive, I'm sorry.
You want to listen? Because you're not listening. If I give you this book, yes? Before I gave you the book, did the book exist?
Yeah, of course. For you.
But according to you, Torah didn't exist if I didn't give it to you yet.
For me, if I haven't seen it,
Oh,
it
for
doesn't
you.
exist.
But the others were given the
How can I
Torah.
study it if it doesn't exist? You're saying you studied, so obviously I have to study it.
I didn't know what is coming, what is coming.
The answer to your question, let me rephrase your question to make it normal.
It's not a question, it's assertion.
Well, okay, let me correct your assertion. The question is, if the others learned Torah, which they did, so why, if Yaakov learned Torah, he definitely learned Chumash. And if he learned Chumash, didn't he learn the story of Yosef being sold? So how did Yaakov not know that his son was still alive? If he learned Torah, we should have known that, right? Even little kids learn Torah know that.
Good point.
Very good point. So what's the answer? So the Ramban says in his introduction to Chumash, the Ramban says that before Matan Torah, the whole Torah was one long word. It wasn't divided into words and sentences yet. It was, listen, it was one long word. Now, if you have the word Bereshit Bar Elokim as a Shemayim V'Aretz, yeah? So if you have Bereshit cut, Bara cut, Elokim cut, okay, then in the beginning God created heaven and earth. But if you don't have it like that, you can have, and it's one long word, so you can learn Bereshit, which is spelled Beis Reis, Bar, Eish, Yudsav. I mean, you can learn it a million different ways. So you didn't learn the story the way we know the story because Torah wasn't divided. But they learned Torah. They learned Torah. That's what our sages tell us. They learned Torah.
No, they were studying, I'm sorry.
How did Noach know which animals are kosher, which animals are not kosher? How did Avraham Avinu keep mitzvahs that he kept? How did he know? Yaakov Avinu says, Im Loven Garti, and Rashi says, and I kept the 613 mitzvahs. How in the world does he know what the 613 mitzvahs are if he didn't learn it? So obviously he learned. Okay, let's go back.
You know, it's always the same thing, you know. We're trying to get some conclusion, says we don't have the time or patience to discuss it.
How much time do you have to say the same
Can
thing?
you tell me the Torah that we say if an other, if they...
1 minute, stop. I want to rephrase the whole issue. When the Talmud, the Gemara says something, do we believe it? Okay. The Gemara says they learned Torah. Now, you have a problem what that means. Okay, so figure out what it means. But don't say the statement's not true. What you're saying is, what the Torah tells us is not true. But how could you say they learned Torah? It didn't exist. Okay, but the Gemara says they learned Torah. The Medrash says they learned Torah. You have a problem understanding. It doesn't mean Torah is wrong. It means you're wrong.
Can I say something?
One second, let me finish. You understand what I'm saying? Before you say something. So if the Gemara says that the Avis learned Torah, that means they learned Torah. That means there was Torah before. So the question is, but it wasn't given yet. So the answer is, it was a different level of Torah. But they learned Torah. Now what's your problem?
Okay, I'll tell you what the problem is. If the Torah is one letter is not correctly written, this Torah is worthless, right? It's pasul.
One second.
Pasul, period.
You're wrong. You learn Chumash from a book. You learn Chumash? Yes? Yes? Is that a kosher Sefer Torah?
Yeah, it is.
No, it's not. A Chumash.
Oh, it's not. Chumash is not kosher.
But when you learn Chumash, are you learning Torah?
Yes.
What does it have to do if it's puzzle or not?
Okay, I'll take it back.
Okay, good.
Okay, so if a Torah, if one letter is
Missing.
or something,
Yeah.
it changes the whole meaning of the sentence, and the whole Torah is, you cannot put it really a Torah. It's a Torah that is pasul, correct?
You can learn from it.
So how can you suggest that the Torah, that all the letters you could read it different ways, it's still Torah? It's not Torah, it's something else. So don't call it Torah.
It is Torah. A Chazal call it
The Torah
Torah.
that the letters are
The
not.
Chazal call it Torah.
It's a pasul.
In Rameir Sefer Torah, you know, Al Chedesh Hazel Lochem. In Rameir Sefer Torah, it said Hacheresh Hoyo Libam. Instead of Chedesh, it was a Reish Hacheresh. Instead of Hazeh, it was Hoya, and instead of Lochem, it said Libam. What?
For running a computer, there are 60 million different languages. There's Fortran, there's assembly, there's COBOL, there's this.
Amen.
The whole thing is to run the computer. But different languages are different.
If you change a letter, a dot, it changes the whole meaning. You can't even access it. How can you suggest that the Torah, that all the letters you could read it anyway, is still Torah? Because I'm sorry, gibberish. It's
By the way, just for the record, I didn't say it. The Ramban said it. So you're saying what the Rambam says, Ramban says, not true?
What I'm saying is that it's
I'm asking you. You tell me it's not true. I want to know. If you tell me it's not true, then you don't believe in Torah. So then we have nothing to talk about.
How can you say that?
I'm asking you. The Ramban says it's not me. If I would say it, you can say you don't know what you're talking about. The Ramban says in his introduction to Chumash that how did the others learn Torah before it was given? That the whole Torah was one long word. Now you want to tell the Ramban is wrong? Fine, you could say that. Then I have nothing to talk to you about.
That wasn't Torah then. It wasn't. How can you say
It was Torah, but in a different way than we have it today. What's the big deal? Okay. Gosh. Okay, let's go weiter. Okay, but Kamek and Sheniklet as the Bechinas Atera, Bechinas Klita Mamish. And therefore he says like this: in order for the seed, it has to take root in the ground. Klita means it holds on to it. Okay, that means it has to take root, it has to germinate in it. So he says, that's what it says, Ashi Misha Balakant for Tamuda Biyodai. Remember we said before, in order for it to happen, there has to be action. If the tefillin's on the table and you think all the intent, you're not doing the mitzvah. It has to be action. That's what he says, Ashi Misha Balakant for Tamuda Biyodai. Because the question is also, why you mean in the hand? Talmud is in the brain, not in the hand. Why do you say Talmud b'yadei? As I not, because only when it takes root, meaning it affects you into action. How do we know that learning affects? When the learning affects the person, then the learning is proper. If it doesn't affect the person, then it's not learning properly. As I nasa means b'chinas smicha. Which is only Ziv Hashchina. So he says, this is what the Gemara says. Fortunate is the person that comes to Gan Eden, and Talmud is in the sense. So he's asking, what's the uniqueness of Torah? If it's Gashmias, in Gan Eden, Torah is a much higher level. They learn it Baruchnias. He said, because the whole essence of Torah, in order to blossom, cannot be in Gan Eden. It has to be in action, in physical earth. Talmud b'yodei means the Torah comes into action. What he learns, he keeps. And then it flourishes infinitely more than Gan Eden. V'zehu Yashesh Yaakov, which is Ayidei B'chinas Shrisha V'klita. B'chinas Yaakov, which he said is Yod Akev, then, which is Torah V'yakom Edas B'Yaakov Tit, and Emes L'Yaakov, and Emes is Torah. Then then it comes at flourishment in Yidden in the level of Lirosh. In other words, relatively speaking, Gan Eden is Yisrael, Lirosh. This world is a level of Yaakov. So he says, Davka through Haboim Yashrish Yaakov, Davka by taking seed in Yaakov, which is a level of action, then it could flourish in the higher worlds. Even in the level of Yisrael. Tenuva is in yin of Pedi. Like it says Tenub Ba, meaning Tevel Shubachinas Knesses Yisrael is Eretz Chayfetz. It says Molu Pnei Tevel Tenuva. Tenuva represents the doing of the Yidden doing Torah mitzvahs. And he says, through Davka, through Pnei Tevel, Nisha Bechinas Gilu Adei Bechinas Yaakov Yisrael Anal. So in other words, what's the flourishing of Torah? Only through the level of Yaakov, Yashresh Yaakov, which means when does it take root? Only in the level of Yaakov, which represents action. And Davka, when it takes root in action, then it could become flourishing and blossoming in the level of Yisrael. But without Yaakov, then it doesn't blossom in Yisrael.
That's why Yaakov is Bria and Israel was the seal.
1 second. See, I didn't finish that yet. In order for this level of Yaakov and Yisrael to come down, it has to be through Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why? Davening was instituted. We know Avram made Shachris, Yitzchak made Mincha, and Yaakov made Arvis. What's the concept of davening? Primarily it's Shemona Esrei, which is Baruch Atah, which is to bring down that level of Elokus, Mehelem al Agilui, from the concealment to the revealed. So therefore, who are the ones that bring down this level of Kedusha into the Gashmistic world, that it's able to be blossoming in the Yidden? Who brings it down? That's the concept of Tefillah, which is Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But first it has to be this level of bitterness, like we learned in Tanya. A person needs the bittul. In other words, in order for somebody to bring elokus down, to be a vessel for godliness, you can't bring down godliness if you're not a vessel. What is the vessel for godliness? Bittul. Because as long as you think you're full of yourself, there's no room for Hashem. In fact, the Gemara has an expression: an empty vessel you can put things into. It holds things. A full vessel you can't put anything into. A person who's full of himself is not a vessel for Elokus. You can't put godliness into a person who's full of himself. Yeah. Now that you ask. So, but an empty vessel, when there's bittul, merirus, bitterness. What's the bittul? Again, bittul doesn't mean I'm a nothing, I'm a nobody. That's an idiot. A person walks around the whole day, I'm a nothing, and nothing, and nothing. He's an idiot. Bittul means I know who I am, I know my accomplishments, but compared to where I should be infinitely greater. Or in other words, when a person feels how distant they are away from Hashem, that causes them bittul. Because no matter how great you are, and you still realize that you're infinite level away from Hashem, that is the bittul that allows godliness to be revealed within you. Because if a person doesn't realize their accomplishments and achievements and talents, then they don't utilize them, they're basically wasting a fundamental thing that Hashem created. God created a person with talent, every person with talents. If they don't utilize the talents and the abilities, whatever the ability is, to utilize it to better the world, they say, I can't, so they're an idiot. Because Hashem says you could make the world better, you could create a dwelling place for Hashem down here, and you can't, and you're not doing it. Why? Because you think you can't. That's not bittul. Bittul is, I realize how far away I am from Hashem, and Hashem says you could do it, and I know I could do it, and therefore I got to do it. Which is like we learned in Tanya, the difference between depression and bitterness. Depression means I'm no good, and therefore you lay in bed a whole day and do nothing, which is only coming from the Yetzer Hara. Merirus, bitterness means I know who I am, but I am so far away from Hashem, there's so much more for me to do. That's also bittul. That's the real bittul, by the way. The real bittul is when you know who you are and you realize how far away you are from Hashem. Like it said, Moshe Rabbeinu knew who he was. If somebody asked Moshe Rabbeinu, who got the Torah from Sinai, and Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to be humble, and he said, no, not me, he's a liar. If Moshe Rabbeinu was asked, who did God speak to? And he says, not me, because he wants to be humble, he would be a liar and an idiot. If he was fighting that he shouldn't. But after the fact, when Hashem said, I'm giving you, and yet Moshe was the most humble person that ever lived. And the answer is, Moshe Rabbeinu knew who he was. Moshe Rabbeinu knew he was the leader of Klal Yisrael. And he knew that he wrote in the Chumash after it was given, or before it was given, V'leikam Navi Eid B'Yisrael K'Moshe. There was never a prophet, Torah's emes, that Moshe gave, Zichru Torah's Moshe Avdi, Torah is called Andema Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu writes, there was never a Jewish prophet as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. So if they ask Moshe Rabbeinu, hey, Reb Moshe, Moshe, who was the greatest Navi? And he wouldn't say, not me. He's lying because he's going against the Pasuk in Chumash. How do you reconcile these two things that Moshe was most humble? Moshe Rabbeinu knew exactly who he was. But Moshe Rabbeinu knew and felt seriously that this is all a God-given gift. If somebody would have been given my neshama, my head, my greatness, they would be infinitely greater. And therefore, what was the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu? As great as he is nothing compared to what he should be. Because Hashem is so infinitely great.
Not should be, could be.
Could be and should be.